Welcome to the Visual 3D Overview video. Visual 3D is the world's leading software solution for 3D motion analysis, and it has been proven in scientific and clinical research labs worldwide. Visual 3D is the tool you need to fully manage, analyze, and report on your 3D movement data. In fact, Visual 3D gives you total control of your data. Visual 3D can do all your kinetic, kinematic, and inverse kinematic calculations. It has the most advanced biomechanical modeling capability available. It supports any kind of marker set, from conventional gate, clusters, and vendor-provided setups to custom-developed minimal marker sets. Best of all, it doesn't matter what motion capture system you have now, and it lets you switch systems without ever losing data. Here's how Visual 3D works. When we start Visual 3D and open a workspace, we see all our data files and how they relate to each other. We can examine our data, make any modifications, and create events in the signal and processing area. We use the model builder to link our marker data into something meaningful and define segments, joint angles, and other model-based computations. Finally, we can use the integrated reporting tool to create meaningful representations of the data analysis with the ability to export it for presentations. Now let's watch it in action. The opening screen takes us into the workspace status mode. Now we will open a sample CMO file. CMO files are sort of like a zip file. They contain a copy of the input data, models, and reports. This area indicates the files that are available in the workspace for processing and how they correlate to any models. Note that the model, called full body static, is lined up with the movement trial, full body walking, and the rows are the same color. This graphically shows us quickly that the movement data is associated to a model. It is necessary to associate motion data to a model in order for the data to make sense, and this way we will be able to see the bones. Tags are used to identify common characteristics between files. Here we create a tag called samples and check all the motion files. Now let's double-click on the full body C3D file and look at the data. Note the file name being viewed is in the combo box at the top. The data and event tree is on the left, and an OpenGL viewer is in the middle. In the OpenGL view, we use the buttons on the mouse to rotate, pan, and zoom around the workspace. The bottom of the viewer has standard video playback buttons, and if we press play, we'll see the visual results of our process trial appear. We can control and limit the playback too. We can also toggle the bones, lines or stick figure, or geometry of the segments, as well as marker IDs and force vector size. Okay, now let's look at our data. On the left, we see the expandable data tree, which lets us see all the data in our active file. Notice that we have defined some events. Markers are also called targets, and here we see both the original data and processed versions of it. Here is the marker data of the one on the left heel. Here is the raw marker data after some processing has been done. Notice that a low-pass signal filter has been applied with a cutoff frequency of 6 Hz. Notice too that there is no mention of what system was used to create the data. Visual 3D is hardware independent, so we don't care if the data came from active systems, passive systems, electromagnetics, accelerometers, or processed video. Now we will display this target's position in the quick view graphing area on the right so we can watch what's happening. In this example, the automatic gate event recognition command has been run. We can see these events here. Events are used as part of the analysis or for setting data ranges in the reports. Let's now have a look at the model building mode. Visual 3D has the most advanced model building capabilities available. Starting with the top tabs, you can create and edit segment definitions, landmarks, also called virtual markers, muscles, and subject-specific data. Moving back to segment definitions, note that there are several predefined segment definitions, but target IDs and subject data are required for each subject or patient. Since this one is already done, let's look at the right thigh segment. Now we see how the proximal and distal portions of the segment are defined, along with associated tracking markers. Note that 3 markers were used to define the segment. Therefore, a radius value is needed for the proximal end here, so that Visual 3D can create a proper geometric cone for the segment. Similar information would be needed if joint centers were used instead of markers. We can also use virtual markers for redefining the segment, either handmade landmarks or landmarks defined using a digitizing pointer. As an aside, you can also control just about everything in Visual 3D, including the size of the targets on the screen. The segment mass and inertial properties have defaults, but can be reset in this area. Also, here is where the graphic for the underlying segment can be modified. The Inverse Kinematics tab is also called the Global Optimization and is used to constrain segment movements. It is generally used for exporting your own models to forward dynamics programs like Sim or OpenSim. Here is where we can view, add, or change landmarks, also known as virtual markers. We can see this landmark is based on a fixed distance from a physical one. This sort of landmark is often used in detailed foot or hand models, or to correct for wearing shoes. Landmarks can also be used to create segments as well. Note that the subject's shoes and marker set used here makes the foot look like the subject is on their toes. To see joint angles based on a flat foot, or examine center of pressure, we can create a virtual segment using landmarks as calibration markers. A kinematic-only segment is only used for angle measurements and has no inertial properties or mass. Once the segments are defined, we can compute model-based data values. Here we can see how a joint angle was created using the left shank as the reference segment measured against our virtual foot segment. Note that you have the ability to negate a segment axis and for you to define the sequence of cardinal angles for the joint angle calculations. Finally, on the top of the screen, we also have some shortcut icons, one of which is to save the model template as a file. Templates are a way to reuse model definitions so that only subject-specific information needs to be changed. Once a model is defined, a motion capture file can be associated with it. Here, the model is on the top, and all the movement files it represents are selected, and you click OK. Now that we have a model and motion data, Let's look at the analysis power of the pipeline. Anything that can be done in the graphical interface can be pieced together and done as a script using the pipeline processor. In fact, the pipeline is needed to access even more commands than the graphical interface can provide. For example, Visual3D has the ability to automatically create events based on patterns or rules, and this functionality is only found in the pipeline. The pipeline processor is a way to extend and enhance the functionality of Visual3D. For example, we can load a simple script that duplicates all the steps we've taken so far. You can see how it clears out the current workspace, opens a file, runs a low-pass filter, and creates the quick view graphs. The pipeline has its own syntax. Some commands, such as the low-pass filter, have a graphical interface. Others, such as the metric dot product, use typical scripting parameters. As you can see, we have a large selection of commands available in the pipeline. Now we can move on to the reporting tool.